All right, it's 12 o'clock. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining this week's Iowa Learning Farms Conservation webinar. We're March 12th at 12 o'clock, so I appreciate folks joining rather than watching the Iowa State game. We know we always have a lot of Iowa State alum and fans, and Iowa State basketball is going on right now in the Big 12 tournament. But we are really fortunate to have Dr. Mike Castellano with us today. Dr. Castellano is a professor in the Department of Agronomy here at Iowa State University. He's the lead of the Iowa Nitrogen Initiative, and he's going to talk to us today about NFACT, a decision support system for N fertilizer management from the Iowa Nitrogen Initiative. And as always, if you have questions, and I think this one we will have a lot of discussion at the end, please type your questions in the chat box and we'll get those to Dr. Castellano at the end of the talk. With that, Mike, the virtual floor is all yours.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. I appreciate those basketball fans that are here or watching both. I'll talk a little bit about the Iowa Nitrogen Initiative as background. The NFACT Decision Support System is a new decision support system, new information for decision making about nitrogen management that's come out of the Iowa Nitrogen Initiative. So I'm excited to introduce everybody to that today and get some feedback. Because the NFACT decision support tool will be a continuously evolving tool, and there's always room for improvement, always room for consideration and new features, and these are great opportunities for us to get that information. So thanks, Matt. I appreciate you and the Iowa Learning Farms team for giving me the opportunity here. So just a little bit of a refresher on the Iowa Nitrogen Initiative or introduction for those of you that may not be familiar with it. The Iowa Nitrogen Initiative is a public-private partnership between Iowa's farmers and the university here, Iowa State, that allows us to take the recent advances in in digital agriculture, precision agriculture, and use those to conduct scientifically robust, fully replicated experiments on farmer fields with farmer equipment at production scale. And using those advances in digital and precision agriculture, it allows us to work with farmers to conduct experiments that don't slow them down, and that really allows us to scale the hundreds of experiments every year. Last year, we conducted over 470 nitrogen fertilizer rate trials fully replicated in the state. We hope to break that record this year in crop year 2025. So taking all those data from those hundreds of trials, it's really allowed us to transform nitrogen research, which in the past was largely limited by the fact that we could only conduct maybe 5 or 10 trials per year in the state on university research farms. With the hundreds of trials that we're conducting every year, we can bring to bear the latest advances in data science and process modeling to help us understand this really challenging problem of what the right nitrogen rate is for a particular location in a particular year in a particular management system, right? Those things combine to generate literally billions of outcomes and many, many different potential optimum nitrogen fertilizer managements. And that's what we're going after here. So just a little bit about the nuts and bolts of the program. We look at historical yield maps. That's not necessary to join. And I should mention that the Iowa Nitrogen Initiative is open to all Iowa farmers and agronomists. Anybody who's interested in conducting a trial is welcome to join us. Just get in touch with us. I'll put the contact information up at the end. If you have historical yield maps, we look at those. We like to try and put 2 trials in a field, one in a high productivity area, which you see on the north end of the field there, one in a low productivity zone. We develop a nitrogen fertilizer prescription for a variable rate applicator, and a well-calibrated combine yield monitor are the only 2 things that you need to have to be able to join the program. Farmer puts that nitrogen fertilizer prescription in the applicator, hits go, trial gets conducted. They send us back the as applied data, which you're looking at on the upper right there. And then they send back the yield data at the end of the crop season, and we have an experiment. On the right, you're looking at a fully executed experiment there in the field. You can see the different nitrogen rates. The precision on these experiments really is remarkable, and it really doesn't even slow down the farmer at all. And that's really one of the benefits here. If you do conduct a trial and include a zero nitrogen rate rate in the trial, we do a bunch of soil and plant sampling in that trial as well, and all that information goes back to the farmer. Here's where we were in crop year 2023, our first full year of the Iowa Nitrogen Initiative, and then again in crop year 2024 with our 470 trials throughout the state. So particularly if you're in a county in the state that doesn't have a trial, reach out, get in touch. We would really like to have your participation and partnership. Every farmer that participates gets a trial report at the end of the year. This is not all that they get, but it's a big piece of it. This is what a report looks like. This trial participant came to us through the Iowa Soybean Association. You can see that's why the logo is there below Iowa State University. We partner with a number of organizations to get farmer partners involved. So it's another way to participate. Second page of the report here, it explains how to interpret the report. And then the third page here has the actual data for the farmer on the right. And so we're going to zoom into that on the next slide so you can actually see it. So here you can see the individual plot data from Andy's trial here. Andy has, of course, agreed to let us use his report. Otherwise, all the data in the Iowa Nitrogen Initiative are completely confidential. And I should emphasize that we only get data from the trial area, which is just 5 to 10 acres of the field. And everything that's done on that trial area, of course, is prescribed by the university. So there's really no data privacy concerns here to worry about. We fit models to the data to identify the optimum nitrogen rate here. Here you can see in this experiment, it was 203 pounds per acre. The yield at the economic optimum nitrogen rate was 287 bushels per acre. And then that produced an efficiency, of pounds of nitrogen per bushel, of roughly 0.71 pounds of nitrogen per bushel. On the right is a benchmarking figure here, which allows Andy to benchmark his trial against all the other trials in the state. So you can't see them, but there's little gray bars there. And each one of those bars, they sum to 470 bars, 1 bar for each trial there. Andy's trial is highlighted in the green bar. Other trials on similar soil types to Andy's are highlighted in the blue bars. And then all those other gray bars represent the other trials throughout the state. So those other blue bars are just highlighted in blue so Andy can get a better idea of how his trial compares to trials on a similar soil type in a similar part of the state. And you can see on the top, his economic optimum nitrogen rate was certainly below average, yet his yield on the middle panel was way above average. And then, of course, that produced an output of Andy had one of the most efficient trials in the state here in 2024 at 0.71 pounds of nitrogen per bushel. Really remarkable performance here. Whatever Andy is doing in his part of the state is something I'd want to be doing on my farm. But the point of this is that it allows the farmer to benchmark their performance against other similar trials in the state. And maybe if the performance is poor, that provides some impetus to think about, well, what could I be doing different in my farm? Thinking about drainage, for example, residue management, soil management, cover crops. What would be some tools, timing of fertilizer source that you might make changes to improve your overall efficiency? So just briefly, some real 2024 results here. Here you can see economic optimum nitrogen rate by region of the state. So we're working to get more region-specific information on how optimum nitrogen rate varies across the state. In 2 years in a row now, we have seen the western part of the state, the western third, really requires less nitrogen than the eastern part of the state in particular. So that's been an interesting outcome past 2 years. Not all that surprising given the relatively dry and deep soil conditions there. Here we're looking at 2023 in the purple versus 2024 in the khaki color. We have the probability distributions of efficiency on the left, pounds of nitrogen I'm sorry, not the efficiency, the optimum nitrogen rate, the pounds of nitrogen per acre, the economic optimum nitrogen rate. So here you can see the rate was the optimum rate on average was a little bit lower in 2023 than it was in 2024. The actual numbers are down here in the table. So about 30 pounds higher on average in 2024. Should be no surprise with the relatively wet spring we had in 2024, which we know is a big driver of higher optimum nitrogen rates. Yet the yield at the economic optimum nitrogen rate in 2024 was also quite a bit higher. And in the end, as a result, the efficiency across the 2 years was relatively close, 0.87 pounds of nitrogen per bushel in 2023 versus 0.94 pounds of nitrogen per bushel in 2024. Just a little bit, I wanted to show this figure, the yield at the economic optimum nitrogen rate in 2024 versus the economic optimum nitrogen rate. So here on the X, we're looking at what the optimum N rate here is. On the Y, the yield that you achieve at that optimum nitrogen rate. And there was a positive relationship here. This is a little bit of a change in thinking from some past university information that kind of moved away from yield goal. I'm not suggesting that we're going back to the yield goal, but it is important. It does emphasize that thinking about pounds of nitrogen per bushel production is an important metric of efficiency for the farm. And we know that if we're moving downwards in pounds of nitrogen per bushel produced, that not only are we benefiting profitability, but we're benefiting environmental performance as well. And so this is really good information for us to see. Finally, here I want to touch on residual fall soil nitrogen in 2024. So these measurements are made on all our zero nitrogen rate trials in 2024. We posted a blog about this on the Iowa State University Extension ICM blog. That just came out last week. You can search Google, you'll find that real quickly. Not only does it show you these data here, but it provides some context to help decision making around these data. But in 2023, I want to emphasize that that most fields had in the top 2 feet of soil. So here we're looking at the top foot on the left. On the right panel, we're looking at the second foot of the soil, so 1 to 2 feet deep. Most fields in 2023, they had about 20 pounds of nitrogen, residual nitrogen left over after harvest. In the relatively wet 2024 year, much less, almost no residual soil nitrogen left in many of our trials. This is a real important result because it emphasizes the power of soil testing, and I'm going to come back to that when we take a look at the NFACT tool here. The other thing I want to emphasize is look at the distribution of data. Yes, on average, most fields have very little residual nitrate left, but there are some outliers. There are some trials that have 25, 50 pounds or more residual nitrate left. And testing for that soil nitrate can aid in making a decision about nitrogen fertilizer management going into crop year 2025. So just a little bit about where we have been and where we're going. So in the past, information we've had for decision making about nitrogen fertilizer management in the state, we had the yield goal, of course, that went from about 1.2 pounds of nitrogen per bushel in the late 80s, early 90s, down to 1 pound of nitrogen per bushel. Then we switched over to the MRTN system, which many of you may be familiar with. That had 4 scenarios for nitrogen management across the state. And now with the NFACT tool that I'm about to show you, it has the opportunity to include 2 rotations, 99 counties, 9 weather scenarios, 3 residual soil nitrogen levels, emphasizing the importance of that residual nitrogen there, and 4 planting date windows for a combination of over 21,000 scenarios. So for those of you familiar with Central Iowa geography, 4 versus 21,000 is very much like driving from Ames, Iowa to Nevada, Iowa, right down the road, versus nearly the whole circumference of the Earth at the equator. We're just a little bit short of that. Maybe in a year or two, we'll get there in terms of our scenarios. So I'm going to switch over my screen here real quickly to the NFACT website, and we will walk through that a little bit here, just to give you an idea of what the decision support system is all about. So just bear with me while I switch my screen, please. Okay, so you could follow along on your home machine. And if you search Iowa State University, if you just go to the website n-fact.ag, you'll get to our website. There are really two tools in one here, and this is something we're very excited about. There's a benchmarking tool where farmers can explore the real outcomes of all of those nitrogen trials that I talked about that we've conducted in the past 2 years. And then also a model-based decision support system. And so we'll start off exploring the benchmarking website. So if you click on the left here, explore on-farm nitrogen trials, it pulls up a map of the state. It'll take a second to load here. It also pulls up a database on the right. And so it may be hard on your screen to see, but you can see in the state the location of each trial here. And those circles are, they're moved around. So even if you took the dead center of a circle, that is not the exact location of a trial. We've really taken pains to anonymize the data here. And then we have the database on the right here, where you can select by region, you can select by previous crop type or year, and then you can filter by the economic optimum nitrogen rate, the yield at the economic optimum nitrogen rate, and the efficiency, the pounds per bushel, to take a look and see how those things come out. And if you scroll down here, you can see how your results come out for your trial relative to the distribution of the trials in the state. And those are changing as I select previous crop, previous year. So all those figures are down there to benchmark yourself against as you select against trials in your region, year as well. And I should mention that every farmer, in addition to that report they get, and in that report, has their trial ID. And they can search for their trial ID and compare the outcome of their individual trial against those other similar trials in similar parts of the state in the same year to get a good benchmark there. Let's go to the decision support tool now. So estimate your optimum nitrogen rate. I'll just go backwards here. So here we can click on discover your optimum nitrogen rate. I should emphasize you have an opportunity to create an account here. You don't have to, but if you do create an account, it allows you to save your scenarios to return to in the future and think about how your scenario might change as you get more information about your operation, as you get more information about how the weather is coming around this spring, as you might get information about your soil sampling and your nitrate levels on your farm. It allows you to adjust these scenarios, save them going forward, and compare them. So discover your optimum nitrogen rate. We'll select Story County here because that's where we are. You could also select by region if you like. So if you're in a county that's split across a county line, you might decide to go to region. We'll go with Story County here. Previous crop, corn after soybeans. Here we can select the precipitation. So we could go with the average spring and average summer precipitation, or we could select for different, maybe we have a wet spring and we're anticipating a dry summer. Here we do have, especially for folks that are side dressing, you can see that this spring precipitation is May 1 through May 30th. So it really gives an opportunity to make some adaptive management decisions based on what's happening for folks that are side dressing fertilizer in particular. So we'll just go with average here for now. Select your post-harvest soil nitrate. So we have less than 20 pounds per acre, 20 to 70, and greater than 70. You could see that in our Iowa nitrogen initiative data, the vast majority, 96% of our trials had less than 20 pounds of nitrogen per acre. So we're going to go with that one coming in here. And let's say before April 30th is our planting date. Hopefully we're optimistic and we get good planting conditions this coming April. It's right around the corner here. And then you can select your nitrogen and corn prices here. And so this doesn't affect the outcome as much as it does affect the economic optimum nitrogen rate based on the price ratio of fertilizer to grain, but it doesn't affect the outcome based on the different types of fertilizer that you could select in this drop-down window, whether you select anhydrous, urea, UAN. It's really just to help folks get the right pricing in. And here you can see we've got dollars a product or dollars per pound of nitrogen, however you want to enter that information. But really the important thing here is the nitrogen to corn price ratio, which you can adjust with this slide bar down here. Estimate our optimum nitrogen rate. And so here is the outcome. So what we see here, and there are little question marks here to help you interpret each outcome. We're showing the 25th to 75th percentile of simulations, of thousands of simulations that determine the economic optimum nitrogen rate for the average soil type in Story County. And that outcome is 25th to 75th percentile is 137 to 193 pounds per acre with an average of 165 pounds per acre. Here you can see the range and the average yields at those outcomes. And then I want to emphasize here on the fly, you could change weather conditions. So what happens if we have 20 to 70 pounds of nitrogen per acre residual? You can see that those rates go down quite a bit, right? And what happens if we have a wet spring and plantings delayed? As a result, you can see the optimum nitrogen rate goes up a little bit there from the 165 to the 186 pounds on average. But again, emphasizing that there's a range here, right? 170 to 215 pounds. And then if you save your scenarios, you'll see your scenarios pop up down here in this table. There's a great function up here in the upper right. It's in this relatively small button, but I don't want to miss it. It allows you to compare multiple scenarios. So here we have our baseline scenario that we just created. And then we can, I'm going to make the screen here a little bit smaller so you can see it all. Here we have drop-down windows where we could adjust anything on the fly and look at how it changes our optimum nitrogen rate. So there I just adjusted planting date, but the default is the same. What happens if our corn price changes, for example? You can see how that affects the optimum nitrogen rate. Any one of these inputs here to the model, you can change on the fly, and of course, save your scenarios to your account if that's something you'd like to do. I do just real quickly, with the last minute or two here, want to provide some information about how the model works and how we're getting those simulated data there. So we're using an ecosystem process model that simulates biophysical systems using sets of equations. I often like to ask folks in an audience, how many of you used a biophysical process model today? And oftentimes few people raise their hands, but everybody used a biophysical process model today, especially on a beautiful day like today where it's going to be in the 60s. If you looked at a weather forecast today, you used a biophysical process model. A biophysical process model simulates outcomes of a biophysical system based on measurements that drive that model. Imagine how accurate a weather forecast would be if we only measured temperature, moisture, humidity, wind speed in 5 to 10 locations throughout the state every day. It wouldn't be very accurate, right? That's where the trials and the benchmarking system here and the process modeling integrate together. They give us those data to run that model with greater confidence across many different management systems across the state of Iowa, at different soil organic matter levels. And right now, we have a lot of assumptions in there, right? So we use the average organic matter value for the county. There are a number of other assumptions in there. And as we move along in the future, we will be able to drill down into those assumptions to separate among them so folks can choose between them. We'll be thinking about getting other things in the model like drainage, residue management, soil management, the timing of nitrogen fertilizer. Those are all things we're thinking about in the future to get in there. So with that, you have our contact information here. If you'd like to join or you have any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch. Here, I'm going to pass it back to
Yep.
Matt. Matt has some slides here to go through. Matt?
Yep. I'll get these logistical slides done and then we'll get to the questions. So if you watch this webinar live and want to earn a CCA CEU, please email Elena Whitaker, ALENAW at iastate.edu by 5 o'clock today. Include your name, the name you entered to watch the webinar, and your CCA number. Again, Elena Whitaker, ALENAW at iastate.edu. We can go to the next slide. If you watch this webinar live and are willing to fill out a voluntary demographic survey, we'd greatly appreciate it. Only one survey response is needed for all 2025 webinars. You can go to iwillearningfarms.org/survey or scan that QR code. I think we'll go to the next slide and plug the webinar for next week. We're gonna change it up. We got the Bats of Iowa updates and suggestions for landowners for Russ Benedict, professor of biology at Central College. That's a change, but everybody, bats are interesting. Folks, please tune in next week. And then the last slide should be that all our webinars are archived on the iwillearningfarms.org/webinars website or on YouTube. We have an Iowa Learning Farms webinars playlist there, or whatever you call it on YouTube, but you can find it there. And so if you want to go back and hear something that Mike talked about in more detail, or see some of the information, go back and do that, or forward it to a friend that might be interested in this. Okay, we do have time for questions, so feel free to type those in, but I'll get to the ones we have right now. So Mike, the trials that you mentioned for the Iowa Nitrogen Initiative, do they all use the same timing of nitrogen application? And then how would N applications, or how might N application season affect the recommendation output by the tool?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. That's a great question. So the only thing that we ask the farmer to change is their nitrogen fertilizer rate. Everything else the farmer does is exactly as they would do it in the area of that trial. As a result, that means we have many different combinations of nitrogen fertilizer source, timing, placement, soil management, planting density, hybrid, you name it. They're all different in all our trials. And there are strengths to that, and there are some things that that make us think about how we present the data as a result. And so the strengths are is that we're getting information from all different operations, and we recognize that there is no one operation for the whole state. As a result of that, though, it's going to take us a few years to get a critical amount of data for particular operations and allows us to capture those in the NFAC decision support tool. So what I can say is, if there's something in there that you'd like to see in there, we'd encourage you to get a trial in if you're performing that management practice, and let us know about how important that management practice is to you and the other farmers in your part of the state. And we have a list of practices that we're thinking about for the future, and we're always eager to hear feedback on what that priority list should look like.
Actually, Elena pinged me and said, Matt, there's one more slide here. If you can go ahead, there's one for a virtual field day tomorrow. So about 24 hours from now, 24 and a half, evaluating rotations of cover crops and summer annual forage. We have Chris Clark, Erica Lundy-Woolfolk, and Patrick Wall from the beef team here at Iowa State. So please tune in tomorrow at that time. Sorry about that, Mike. Um, in your benchmark graphs, that N pounds of N per bushel, is that the applied nitrogen for the corn crop?
Yep,
Yep.
exactly. So that's the applied nitrogen per bushel that's harvested at the end of the season. A couple of things I'd mention there is, there's about 0.56 pounds of nitrogen in a bushel of corn. So that'd be about our low end of like where the theoretical long-term sustainable limit on efficiency is in terms of maintaining our balance. Um, and then you could think about those old yield goal methods of 1 or 1.2 pounds of nitrogen per bushel in the past. And our numbers are the same as those, right? So those provide a benchmark against which to use those numbers for.
Um, there's a one here. A few others that we'll get to that you touched on a little bit, but here's one that I don't think has been. How variable are hybrids in their end response? And would you ever add specific cultivars as an option?
Yeah, great question. So I, I I didn't get a chance to thank my colleagues specifically, but in particular, gives me an opportunity to thank Melissa Miller, who's the project director for the Iowa Nitrogen Initiative. If you're interested in running a trial, Melissa's the one who's going to help you. And Sotirios Arkantoulis, who co-leads the Iowa Nitrogen Initiative with me. And Sotirios is the brain behind all that modeling. And he has a fantastic experiment that is called the 5 by 5 by 5 experiment, where he has 5 hybrids by 5 nitrogen rates by 5 planting densities. And he's done this at quite a few places throughout the state. And the short answer is yes, hybrid does have an effect. So it's one more thing for us to think about in the model as we think about optimum nitrogen management.
And I think back to Chad Poole's presentation from North Carolina, where they looked at different hybrids and their response to soil wetness conditions, and they saw, some hybrids performed well in a poorly drained environment, and some did not. So another factor that could play into all this as well. So
Yeah. Matt, when I say billions of
I,
combinations, sometimes people are like, whoa, Mike, we get it's an important problem. You don't have to exaggerate. But I'm not. It
no,
really,
no, no, exactly,
it really
exactly.
is billions.
Here's one that kind of gets at that. And I think you kind of answered this, but were any of these farms where the research was conducted using strip till, no till, cover crops, or small grains, or were they all corn? Well, they weren't all corn soybean rotation because I know some were continuous corn, I believe.
Yep. No, we have a lot of different management practices in that 470 trials. We did have quite a few with cover crops this year. We're working on getting a little bit of a blog note on that, particularly with regard to residual nitrogen levels
Okay.
with the cover crops. As we know, cover crops can really reduce that residual nitrogen that's prone to leaching losses. And in fact, we've seen that pan out very nicely in those trials, just as one example. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I think just to maybe amplify what you said before is that uh, the more years that you can generate over a range of different management conditions, you'll be able to improve the NFAC model, I think, to have maybe more options for management, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely, Matt. Yep. Yep.
Okay. Um, let's see here. Yeah, and I guess this gets at it is they're asking, when are you going to add the soil organic matter as a scenario, since that drives the soil's ability to make N in the soil biologically available to plants? And I think Soterius mentioned that this morning that we maybe need to do that.
It's in there. So it,
Okay.
it, it is in there. It's not an option for users to select right now. But if you use the county-based version or the MLRA, the region-based version, basically the way those regions are delineated and the way those counties are delineated is by the average organic matter in that county. And so when you select a county, what's going on behind the model is it takes the 5 most common soil types in that county and it provides an area weighted mean soil organic matter value for those 5 soil types in the county. So, for example, If you go from one county that saddles a physiographic region to another, you can literally double your organic matter by moving from one county to another in some situations. And as a result, you'll see big swings from county to county in some of the optimum nitrogen rates that are outcomes of the model there. So it is in there indirectly. We do hope in the future, of course, to get the option in there to actually select particular soil associations or soil types.
Um, there's this in person indicated there seems to be a significant range of that nitrogen use efficiency across farms on similar soils. Is there a way for producer to look for data from producers using similar N management?
That's where the benchmarking tool comes
Okay.
in. And another example of how and when, as we collect more and more data in that database, you'll be able to, we'll add additional columns there, things for soil management, strip till, no till, chisel plow, things like that, cover crops, timing of nitrogen, source of nitrogen. And farmers will not only be able to filter by their region, but also by those particular management practices to sort down to the trials that are most comparable to their operation and benchmark themselves against those trials in those specific years. So that's it's absolutely a goal of ours, but it's gonna, 470 trials, it sounds like a lot, and I'm happy to pat myself on the back over it a little bit. But when you think about it in the context of all the operations in the state, it's really not that much data, right? And so we do need to continue to collect this data. We need the continued partnership of Iowa farmers to be able to deliver on these requests in the future.
Yeah, and I think one thing to maybe to highlight kind of from an external user kind of looking at NFACT is, you know, in some ways at the university we wait till the end to put out a product, when we have all the variables identified, or where we have all these uncertainties, a little better handle of. And I think it's great in many ways that this is out there now, even with some of the caveats about things that you want to add so people can get familiar with it, so maybe you can get some input, that helps improve it over time.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. That's certainly, like I said at the beginning, this is, will benefit from continuous improvement. It will constantly evolve into the future. And the only way that can happen, though, is with the continued participation from farmers, the continued support of the state, and the continued drive to get more trials and feedback from the users. Yeah.
Great. One person was curious that besides soil nitrogen, are you measuring other soil properties at these sites?
Yeah, we do a general fertility test as well, 0 to 6 inches to match up with Iowa State fertility information on P and K and lime. Um, we we make those soil tests for nitrogen from 0 to 1 and 1 to 2 feet at pre-plant, at the V6 growth stage, right when nitrogen uptake by the crop ticks up to its highest rate, and then we do it again at post-harvest. So those are the four soil measurements that we're making. Well, and then the general soil fertility test, it includes many more measurements than just one. But,
Okay. Would there be in the future the potential to tie carbon to the nitrogen efficiency?
um, I guess I need a little bit more detail on that question. Essentially it is tied into the nitrogen use efficiency through the pounds of nitrogen per bushel. You could very well think of that as how much nitrogen do I need to put into the system to get some carbon production out of that? Because ultimately we're growing corn for starch, right?
Mhm.
And starch is mostly carbon, right? So in many ways, it's embedded in that efficiency metric.
Okay. Um, what is driving that variability in EONR shown in the NFACT tool? Is it weather, soil management, genotypes, or a combination?
It's a
Your co-
combination. But one thing I didn't mention is not only are we averaging across soil types, but we're running the model for 40 weather years. And so most of that variation is driven by those 40 weather years, the driest, hottest year to you know, the perfect moisture with the perfect light. Yeah.
So, can you go back? What was from the I&I trials in 2024? The EONR was okay about 196 and then 224. Has anybody ever looked what the EONR would be from the NFAC tool over all of those sites?
Oh, that's a great question. And,
Yeah.
you know, we haven't done that, Matt.
Okay.
What we could do and what we would want to do in a comparison like that
Yeah.
is obviously we'd want to try and simulate those scenarios and limit ourselves to the particular weather year,
Yeah,
right?
right, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's somebody asked about, kind of that EONR maybe being higher than, the what the MRTN when that was a tool there. But a couple things. One is 2024 might have been a little higher because of the wet spring in a lot of areas. And then also, really, I think a recent paper um, that Mitch Baum and yourself and Soterius published is documenting that increase in the EONR over time, maybe since some of the previous research was done.
Yeah, Matt, thanks for highlighting that. And you were an author on
Yeah,
that
right.
too, of course.
My role was very limited compared to all the rest of you, but
Um,
yeah,
but yeah, the paper Matt's referring to,
yeah,
and there's a news story on this that just came out
I'll-
last week from the university showing the optimum nitrogen rate, as Matt indicated, is going up over time. And there are three reasons for that. The primary reason and the biggest reason is that the amount of nitrogen we're harvesting in corn is going up over time, right? Because we are increasing yield by about 2 bushels or a little over a pound of nitrogen harvest per acre per year in grain. And so, just like your bank account, if you're going to withdraw more money, you better put more money in, right? And then the other two reasons are increased residue production. So the greater the residue production, the higher the carbon to nitrogen ratio, the more carbon, thinking back to that question about carbon use efficiency, there's more carbon in the system. We need more nitrogen to degrade that carbon, decompose that carbon. It also keeps the soil relatively cool and wet, and that slows the nitrogen mineralization for more organic matter. And so that's the second big reason why those optimum nitrogen rates are going up over time. And then the third is the climate's getting wetter, and that plays a role too.
great. Thanks on that, Mike. And I put the ISU news release article there in the chat box if anybody uh, wants that. And I think that we've gotten pretty much all. Oh no, are there comparable programs in neighboring states, or how can we carefully transfer this to nearby areas along the borders of Iowa?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So many of our physiographic regions stretch political boundaries. The Des Moines lobe would be the best example, where it goes up to St. Paul, um, the Twin Cities up there. Um, southern Iowa stretches into Missouri, and so those folks in the state can take advantage of the model and use the results to help their decision making in their states. We do hope other states will adopt this approach to decision making. We think with the advances in precision agriculture, there's just a remarkable opportunity to collect more data, to drive those really data hungry, tools that are becoming available, process modeling, artificial intelligence, all these things can help us really drill down into this really, really tough question of what the optimum nitrogen rate is.
All right. Well, we just might have had one more comment come in. Um, will there be a way in the future for a user to look at good NUE values and drill in to see how that producer is managing their N?
Yeah, so
Yep.
that's already there to some extent.
Okay.
It will improve greatly in the future. But in that database on the benchmarking part of NFACT that I showed, you can sort by the pounds of
Oh,
nitrogen per bushel. And so you can go and look at those fields with the lowest pounds of nitrogen per bushel and see what's common
Okay.
among those. And as we get those things like source and timing into the database, folks will be able to really even drill into that further. But like a great example right now is you can see by looking that the pounds of nitrogen per bushel, no surprise, are lower for corn following beans than they are for corn following corn. So there'd be a good way to increase your efficiency right off the
Yeah.
bat.
All right. Oh, thanks so much. Oh, we're getting more coming. Oh, um, there was somebody that asked if you're collecting any information on how this impacts the environmental outcomes.
You know, the pounds of nitrogen per bushel
Yeah.
again, right? So it's not direct, but if you are managing towards a lower sustainable pounds of nitrogen per bushel, keeping in mind that the 0.56 is the theoretical limit, you are doing a better job, not just for your profitability, but also for the environment. I really want to emphasize that. And so we hope that that is a big way that folks use this decision support system and the information that we provide in here is we hope that it generates some good competitive spirit when you can benchmark your system against others and really work to improve that pounds of nitrogen per bushel.
Yeah. And I guess I would add that while it's not being, well, say water quality output's not being measured on each of these individual sites, a number of us have various drainage water quality sites throughout the state that we are using some of these different, end management practices and trying to document nitrate loss, and so some of that may help us kind of ground truth some of the performance of these practices or systems.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. Okay. With that, Mike, uh, can I, sorry, there were a couple more questions here, I guess.
Let me
Yeah,
take a
that's,
question here,
yep,
Matt, about
yep,
the weather forecasts. So
yeah,
you have a
sounds,
model track
yep,
active
that sounds great.
active on the fly weather
Yep,
forecasts?
yep,
The answer is no. You can do that indirectly by changing that precipitation for the spring for the month of May as things unfold, especially if you're applying your fertilizer as a side dress application, which would generally be in late or May, early June. So you can use the model indirectly like that. In the long term, in the future, when we're thinking about always continuous improvement to help Iowa farmers and Iowa agriculture, yes, in the long term, that is a goal to get the active weather forecast
yeah.
embedded in the model so we can make those decisions.
Okay. Elena put in the chat box that please join the Midwest Cover Crop Council. Get up next Wednesday morning, 8:30 Central Time, and listen to Bill Johnson uh, from Purdue and Barry Fisher talk about terminating cover crops and planning for unexpected weather, kind of on the weather theme that Mike just mentioned. So the link is there to register for that. Again, if you're on and need a CCA CEU, please email Elena Whitaker, ALENAW, at iastate.edu by 5 o'clock today with your name, the name you entered to watch the webinar, and your CCA number. I'd encourage you to tune in next week to hear about bats and be on the lookout for additional Iowa Learning Farms webinar topics. With that, I want to thank Mike for the great work that he and the team, Sotirios, Melissa, Mitch Baum, so many others are doing. I think this is just of vital importance to Iowa agriculture. And so thanks, Mike, and your team. And hopefully, as this continues to advance, you will accept the Iowa Learning Farms invitation to present on this again. And maybe we'll do it when there's not an Iowa State basketball game going on as well. But, that's unfortunately the Big 12 Conference didn't accept my request to not have the game at this time because of the webinar. So with that, Mike, you get the last word. Now shut up.
Well, thanks, Matt. Yeah, I guess if there's one thing that's bigger than nitrogen in Iowa, maybe it's basketball.
Yeah.
But I got to say, mosquitoes love me, and I that means I love bats. So I'm looking
Oh,
forward to the
all
weather
right.
this week to learn how I can reduce my mosquito population in my backyard.
All right. All right. Okay. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you.